there will never be another Tesla, just like there'll never be another Apple. And we're not supposed to use words never and always, but they are in a sweet spot, and they are a bellwether to be revered and targeted, but never going to be replaced.
Volkswagen is pouring $5 billion into US electric car maker Rivian. The two sides will make a joint venture to exchange tech and boost both companies' development of new electric vehicles. Well, joining me now is Joe McCabe, President and CEO of AutoForecast Solutions. Thanks very much for joining us, Joe. $1 billion up front, the rest in the coming years. How much does Rivian need this deal?
Yeah, they need it. Rivian had the classic model where they came out with a high-value, marquee, high-price vehicle to move the early adopters, and now they're in the mass market movers. That more discerning consumer that worries about price and range and infrastructure, all the headwinds of electrification, and now they're going to find a vehicle that's going to be in that $45,000 process. They've been losing tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle. They're not the only one losing in this EV space right now, and they're going to need this infusion to sort of survive the next wave of their products coming out.
Yeah, I heard it reported by Reuters that they're losing about $40,000 on every single car that they deliver. So it's tough for them right now. Is this anywhere near the kind of support, this joint venture, that Rivian and Volkswagen need to take on the likes of Tesla and BYD?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is that there is a reality that says we have an idea and we can have great software and great technology, but execution to the manufacturing side is a very difficult hurdle in the global automotive space. So if you combine the global expertise for Volkswagen, the 100 years plus experience, the multiple brands, the brand loyalty, the global locations, and then you combine that with the software-defined vehicle architecture that Rivian brings to play, it's a good fit. We're going to find out that right now you can't get there organically. A lot of manufacturers, even legacy players, know they've got to have to partner. I mean, the Honda Acura products right now are being built on GM vehicle platforms. Honda and Nissan are on a platform. There's a lot of different joint ventures out there knowing that they have to move for a common goal together in order to get this momentum in the next phase of the mass market, which is a very discerning consumer trying to move this metal.
Yeah, you had a lot of interesting things to say there. I want to kind of approach them one by one. So starting off with the software. So Volkswagen has struggled with its software carryad, so delays, rising costs. Will this fix that? Will this help them to leapfrog those problems?
I think it'll help it because you have a company like Rivian who is focused. That's the underlying value proposition of these newer startup companies. When you look at Tesla, they're light years ahead of everyone else in terms of the software and the technology. Then you got to look at their vehicle and say, well, maybe their vehicle is getting a little long in the tooth, but they still build an ecosystem around it. We see this as the next front for all of the startup EVs, that they try to put a product out there. It may be a hit, it may be a miss, but at least they have the underpinnings of the technology and the software to then say, maybe we don't want to be long-term in the assembly side. Maybe we want to be vehicle agnostic, the brains of the vehicle, almost the Bluetooth of the vehicle. And if we can spread our knowledge across multiple manufacturers, that will help us win the long game versus we have to build 1, 2, or 3 vehicles and hope that these vehicles aren't just home runs, but they're grand slams, that we're not constantly losing money on every single vehicle that we sell.
Okay, is it some kind of Faustian bargain, though? So is there a risk of this deal cannibalizing Rivian's market share? After all, Volkswagen wants to boost its share in US EVs.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Volkswagen's got the Scout product coming out in 2026 in South Carolina. We think that's a direct competitor to Rivian products. So it's more of a finding a way to survive now and then bifurcating the market in the future. I mean, if you look at it and you look at the valuation of Rivian in the last several years, we have no confirmation on this, but I've been in business for 25 years, and there's a logical path that says, okay, if we can establish this business and we can make Rivian a software company, then Volkswagen becomes a owner of us eventually, or at least a majority stakeholder or heavy owner, when Ford tried to do it did have a lot of success with it, and Amazon and things of that nature. So we see that if you find a way to work with a company that can be 100% laser focused on the software side, and then combine that with the expertise of the legacy manufacturing side, that allows them to sort of hit this market hand in glove. Now, in the early parts, there's going to be a lot of sharing of ideas and technology, but there is a path that says Rivian potentially could be under the Volkswagen family umbrella, 10, 15 years from today.
Interesting. And then you point out the difference between the legacy car makers and the kind of startups that are coming on along the last few years. Why do big car makers like Volkswagen with deep pockets struggle with the development of high performance but low cost EV tech and the software to go along with it?
Yeah, there's a significant amount of overhead on major global companies like Volkswagen, like Stellantis, like GM, and all that, right? Huge amount of legacy costs in there. You have a corporate responsibility, you have a social responsibility. These are all numbers that go in the cost column. And sometimes these large companies are more like a freighter. They can't really pivot, where these new companies that come on board that are laser focused are more of a speedboat. They can sort of pivot in that direction, and they can really push money in different pockets, going, okay, maybe we don't want to build this vehicle in volume anymore. Maybe we want to focus on our software. It's like the Uber model. The Uber model is the value is in their software kind of thing. For Tesla, the value right now isn't even in their charging network kind of conversation. This is an idea where they can sort of pivot and move. In the past year, suppliers would try to vertically integrate all their supply chain, but then it got out of hand because competition was tough. Now in this EV space, when you find someone that says, okay, we can do the batteries, we can do the technology, we can do the software, if you can bring these in together and there's sort of a win-win proposition from a revenue standpoint, it really allows the legacy players to stay in their lane and at the same time branch out and partner with specialists and experts in these fields.
Okay, so VW shares fell 2% after the news came out. Not so unusual itself when such deals are announced. But what do you think Volkswagen investors are thinking about this deal?
I think they see it also when you look at $1 billion that could turn to $5 billion. You look at that investment that is basically a stock play, that all of a sudden there's an ownership in the Rivian model. I think investors understand that there's this next wave that has to be done electrification. We never drank the EV Kool-Aid that all of a sudden we're 100% EV. Electrification needs to be considered a solution, not the solution. It's one product in a balanced portfolio, and it's not for everybody. And that's not saying you're anti-environment if you're not into electrification. It's just not for everybody. So there's got to be this bridge technology over the next 5-10 years that says, I need to convince a consumer that a plug is not a disruptor in their life. And a plug-in hybrid is going to be the way to get there. And then hopefully eventually move that consumer into the BEV space. So anytime you hear about media about pushing the electrification agenda, it's more of a governmental agenda. It's a more environmental agenda. It's not a consumer initiative. So the idea is you need to find a way to make money over the next 1, 2, 3 life cycles, meaning 5-year life cycles of vehicles. And I think the shareholders will respond in kind, saying, we know we can't get there organically. We know we have to branch out and find new attractive ways to get there. Volkswagen is not building a strategy to knock themselves out of the EV market. In fact, we have Volkswagen as a market leader by the end of the decade, eclipsing Tesla in this space. So we think it's a very smart play. And this forecast from AFS was pre-Rivian conversation. So we think it's not a bad play. We think the risk is low, and we think the return could be high.
Okay, and you talk about staying power. So EV startups like Fisker, Faraday, Canoo all wanted to repeat what Tesla did, but failed. Is this just par for the course, risky startups going under, Silicon Valley style? Have they made fatal mistakes, or is the EV market just an especially hard place to get off the ground?
That's a combination. It is definitely a hard place to get off the ground. Tesla was a timing issue. They really came out with a great product. They built an ecosystem around them. The Apple of cars, they're always called, right? So they built an ecosystem where Tesla consumers will buy a Tesla and they love it. And there might be body tolerance issues. There may be headliner. There may be quality issues on a vehicle. They say, hey, well, it's a Tesla. I'll live with it because they'll do better. And other manufacturers don't be held to that same standard. It took Tesla 11 years to be profitable. And that profitability is off the backs of the legacy manufacturers who were being penalized with their bad carbon footprint. So they had to buy the credits. Now we have Tesla in a situation where they can sort of outsource and charge money for their charging infrastructure. So Tesla has a lot of different ways of going. Tesla, we always talked about, hey, is this startup company? They're not a startup company anymore. They're a legacy manufacturer. And now we're trying to see the real cracks. This idea of not saying you want to build 20 million cars per year, turning off your plans for a Mexico plant, deciding that we're going to use existing capacity. These are big conversations that a legacy player has. Elon didn't have to have these conversations in the past. He could say something on X or Twitter, and all of a sudden the stock price moves by 10%. Now it's a different model. All the ones are trying to find the Tesla model. There will never be another Tesla, just like there'll never be another Apple. And we're not supposed to use words never and always, but they are in a sweet spot, and they are a bellwether to be revered and targeted, but never going to be replaced. Now we have to find a more balanced way to hit this market over time, not with these unbelievable winning products. And now we're going to be in a competitive space. There are going to be over 700 unique nameplates by the end of the decade that are BEVs all over the globe competing for the same consumer. And that means you're going to have a very, very competitive product and a very competitively priced product.
And among these car companies are going to be plenty of Chinese firms as well. How do you see protectionism harming EV adoption going forward, such as, for example, the EU is worried about a flood of Chinese cars coming into the European market and disrupting the established players here. Do you see that there's going to be an increase in tariffs going forward, especially against Chinese car makers?
Yeah, the funny part of this industry is that profitability doesn't seem to be a moniker, right? You got Tesla, you got Rivian losing $40,000 per vehicle, Ford saying they lost $100,000 per vehicle. Like I said, Tesla took 11 years for profitability. This is a market share game. And when I say about the Chinese, it's not if, it's when. Tariffs are going to be a nice stopgap to keep the Chinese out, but it's not going to keep them out forever. And then what happens with those tariffs it's got to be looked in a smart way by the manufacturers. Tariffs will be increasing, but the legacy manufacturers in those regions have to use that time, sort of a stay of execution, to build a strong market share proposition. So when the Chinese do hit the market in volume, which they are in Europe, and that's going to pull back a little bit with tariffs, they have to give China headwinds, right? China just wants market share. They don't care about losing revenue or profitability for the sake of market share. So when they come in with a less expensive product, even if they're tariffed 100%, they're going to want to still compete in that market for the long game of building a market share and then eventually building a product in a local market. The old model is you find a way to sell 50,000 units in a market, import it, and then anything over that becomes more of a cost. Now you plant your flag in that country and you build domestically. And when they build domestically, they're going to build jobs and tax revenue, and everyone's going to forget. Everyone forgets that Volvo is Chinese owned. So there's different pockets that people are looking at right now in terms of this competitiveness of the evil Chinese empire. There's no way going to keep them out. There's a way to basically slow the progress. So we do see tariffs being that number one tool right now that any government can say, wait a second, we need to build our local market, not just invite others to cannibalize that local market.
So with all of these headwinds that these car makers are looking at, are you expecting in the short to mid-term at least that we're going to see more of these kinds of deals like the $5 billion that Volkswagen is putting into Rivian?
I do. I see, if not money, it's going to be partnership. Like I said, the GM BEV3 platform is what the Honda Prologue and Acura ZDX are built off of. Exact same vehicles, just, underpinnings, just completely different brands. Honda's in conversation with Nissan. Honda's in conversation to build a Sony product. Okay, so there is a lot of partnerships. Stellantis with Leap Motors. I think again, we come back to the fact that doing this organically is not a viable option. There's a lot of battery capacity to be put out there. There's a lot of conversation of clean mining and things like that, trying to fill an environmental agenda while still building a product that a consumer wants. And manufacturers have realized that the only way to do that is to do it together in the beginning. So when you put a battery plant up there, how do you get that battery plant to north of 80% utilization? You can't do it on your own because it's a low volume play right now. You have to basically get to the point where you have high volume, or at least mid-size volume, where you can justify the investment and the cost and accept a loss on the profitability for at least the next several, if not 5 years, to build up the market share. So again, I think we're going to see much more of this going forward, of a supplier finding a way. This is just another way of looking at a hard parts supplier. This is, I say now, we have a software development architecture supplier. How do we then embed that in all the product? If you think about it, the owner of the brains of the car is going to be the winner at the end of the day, because they're not going to care what car they're on. They're just going to have some commonality of the brains that drives that vehicle, and that becomes a revenue model for that manufacturer, whether it's shared intel, whether it's understanding consumer behavior, anything going in there that says, how do I increase my revenue per car without having to build more capital intensive vehicles to get it done?
Well, all I know is with all of this dynamism in the market, there's going to be plenty of work for you ahead. Joe McCabe of AutoForecast Solutions, thank you very much for your time on this one.
Thank you.